Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Culturama. This is our third weekend. This is our first event of the weekend. And today we have people from Tahoma Literary Review, which is one of my favorite magazines. It's a really interesting literary magazine that's kind of, I don't know, I'll let them tell you what vein it is. We have three editors, Anne, Jim, and Mare. And how this is going to go is they're going to talk a little bit about the magazine, and then we're going to just start taking questions. So we've had a couple of book publishers, we've had a couple of small magazines, and now we have a larger literary magazine. And you can see Anne's got the covers right there. And so it's a little bit different, probably a different process in submitting that sort of thing. So we're going to talk about what it is they're looking for, basically. So Anne, Mare, and Jim, take it away.
Great. Thank you, John. Thanks for everyone for joining us. John said that we would get a pretty wide geographic spread of people coming in. Sounds like we're kind of on the West Coast group now, but it's great to see you all. And John, thank you for inviting us to join you here at Culturama. Yeah, so I'm Jim Gerhardt and Ann Beeman and Mare Heron Hake. We're kind of the three publishers and three of the editors at the magazine. I think John's. Oh, you saw the covers from Anne, and so the magazine started. I just give a quick background on the magazine. It started with 2014 with two other editors and founders. Just blank Joe Pinto and Kelly Davio. And then Anne, Mare, and another partner of ours, Yishan Lai, and I took over in 2017. And the magazine comes out three times a year. We typically have 25 to 27 pieces in each issue, and it's a variety of fiction, nonfiction, and poetry. Can be of all lengths. We really like to see flash fiction, and we also take prose up to 6,000 words. And Mare and her fellow poetry editor, we also love to see longer poems. And don't want to take too much of Mare's thunder here, but we also hear that poets who like longer pieces don't find a lot of places who are interested in seeing their work, and so we like to be open to that, to longer pieces. So as I said, we're currently doing 3 issues a year. We're thinking about cutting back to 2, but we'll open a reading period for about 10 weeks before each issue comes out. And kind of for the mechanics of submitting, we use the internet platform Submittable, where people can you can upload your pieces, then we see them and process them and respond to them through that. We are an independent magazine, which we're not affiliated with a university or any other publishing, and we support ourselves mainly through issue sales, through the fees that come through submissions, and even though we're not a nonprofit, that people do make donations to help support us, which is always welcome. Yes.
A really important point is that we pay. So it's not just, it's not just supporting the printing and publishing and staff overhead. It's we want to pay all up and down the masthead, all the contributors, the cover artist, everybody. So,
and that's been one of the priorities of the magazine since Joe and Kelly started it. And some other kind of principles or some of our motivations are we want to support the writing community. So we always like to promote what else, people who've been in our magazine, we like to publicize when they have other successes. And we've really been building out, trying to broaden our representation and to present a wide range of writers and voices. One one step we've taken in that direction is a couple issues ago, we started a submission category for contributors from historically marginalized groups, where we don't charge submission fees for anyone who sees themselves from a marginalized group and can use that to submit. And that has really broadened our base of what we see. We had, I think, 5 contributors in our last issue from that category, and those are writers we might not have seen otherwise without that category. So I think that's done. We're looking forward to how that's expanded what we're able to share.
And Jim, if I could
Yes, ma'am.
mention, why don't you talk about the website a little bit?
Yes, let's see if I can manage to share the screen quickly and just give a quick look at our website. So this is where, so here's TahomaLiteraryReview.com, and we have, a front page of the issue and guidance about when we'll be opening for each reading. One thing we can take a quick look at is all of us, our masthead. You can see Anne, our nonfiction editor. Jessica is Mayor's co-poetry editor. Leanne is our fiction editor. There's me. Bernard Grant is one of our associate fiction editors. We have 3 associate fiction editors to help with reading and providing feedback. And here's Mare. Stefan is another one of our associate fiction editors, as is Isaac. And another feature of our website that we really really enjoy presenting and sharing is this chance to read or listen. And we sell hard copy and digital versions of the magazine, but we also periodically will post excerpts online of articles or pieces from the issue. So every week or so we'll put up a new sample of what's been in our latest issues. And then also we have a SoundCloud page where you can go and
Expect Grace
by
by Chisato. On the expressway's edge, slender on.
So that starts right up. But so we give our contributors get a chance to read their work, and we can share that with everyone. And that's for anyone who we accept. We offer them the chance to record their work, and we post it up here. So that's a quick run through, and we'll certainly have plenty of time for questions, but for now I think I'd like to pass it on to Anne to speak a bit of our nonfiction category.
Okay, so I'm going to dive into the question of what am I looking for when I am reading in the Tahoma Literary Review queue of submissions. I really like flash nonfiction. We call flash up to 1,500 words. That's almost a long piece of flash fiction. I would say in the 1,000 range, 800, around in there. I really like tight flash nonfiction, and I really like alternative forms, hermit crab essays. Intention is what I'm looking for, both in short and long nonfiction pieces. If you're going to use a word 6 times, I want that word to have import in that piece. I am looking for. These days I want more food writing. I love food writing. It's when we don't do theme issues with Tahoma Literary Review, we find that once we open up a reading period, the theme sort of finds itself. Sometimes all of a sudden everyone's writing about water, or everyone's writing about COVID, but that kind of thing. The zeitgeist kind of outs when a reading period opens up. What else do I look for? I really like food writing, and I really like place-based writing, and pieces that focus on one mundane thing that turns out to be representative of something much larger. And I think that mostly I like a lot of different genres of or styles of nonfiction. And I'm going to turn it over to Mare for her take on poetry.
Well, hello, everybody. Poetry is kind of a different beast because it can be so many different things. And my job as an editor is to make sure that as many of those different things can be represented in a single issue as possible. So I never tell somebody not to submit. If they only write in free verse, or if they only write in something that's like they hear rap in their head, but they write down the lyrics, or if they're writing a 6-page poem about, the goddess Athena, it doesn't matter what it is, because you have just as good a shot as having a slot in our magazine as not. And, when I'm reading for something that is original to you, and it doesn't have to be an original theme. I go back to the example. I had an art teacher when I first started college, which was actually in my 40s. It was an appreciation of art, and he put up a slide, and it was about 16 different versions of the Madonna and Child from the Renaissance, and pointed out that it doesn't matter what the theme is. What matters is that you do it as well as you can and you make it your own. So yeah, poetry is always going to have the theme of a lover who did you wrong, or grief, or what I'm seeing a lot of now is people who have lost loved ones to COVID, or who have lost a lifestyle that they used to have. Poetry is a place where worries come out, but also where you can see the flip side. Yes, you're worried now, but the joy of having had it to begin with. That's what poetry is all about. Charlie Brown. But it really can be anything, and that's what I want to stress. If somebody tells you that you're not writing poetry because it's not in the right meter, or it doesn't rhyme, or you don't understand the forms, because by the way, the forms can get pretty darn complicated if you want to go that route. It doesn't matter, because nobody's your voice. Nobody is you. So yeah, that's that. And we have 2 poetry editors because the queue, the amount of people who submit to our magazine in poetry can be overwhelming. And that's for any one person to read. So we have 2. And that's something to keep in mind as you get into this, and as you submit your work, submit poetry anywhere, that you will always be in a crowded room. So if the answer is no, take it from an editor that it's not telling you your work sucks. It's not telling you that you as a poet sucks. It's telling you that you were in a very crowded room. And because you can't see that on the other side of the screen, you don't know how many people are also sending to the magazine. That doesn't mean don't try. It means you might hear no, and it doesn't matter. And that's my pep talk. I don't know what else to tell you. What else? Am I missing anything, Anne, Jim?
No, but so our fiction, we don't have any representation from our fiction editor. So Jim is our proxy for Leanne Dunich, who is, I believe, she's teaching at she's in British Columbia, and we have Canadian. We're an international organization. So she's teaching today. So or at this, I'm sorry, she's teaching at this time slot. So Jim is Leanne. Imagine.
Yeah, Leanne had joined us almost a year ago, I guess. Done a couple issues with us now, and her activity level, as Ann said, she's teaching right now. She's teaching in two different classes, two different institutions right now. She's helping us as a fiction editor. She just launched a new book, as did Mare, we should say also.
Thank you.
And also and Jessica, our other poetry editor. So we've had a lot of book birthdays this year on our staff, which has been really, really exciting. But so I wanted to take off on one thing that Mare mentioned about submissions and being accepted and being declined. And I don't know if anyone follows Becky Took, who has a blog and a newsletter about submitting, and she does periodic interviews with magazine editors as well. We were featured. She talked with us a few months ago, but she just this morning had a letter. If I don't know if anybody sees it, but she mentioned how she'd been accepted at a magazine she'd been sending to for 15 years, and is one of the pieces that had been many, many different places. And as she said, it wasn't a rejection of the piece, and it hit the right person at the right time, and it was the right piece for the right editor to read at that moment or for that issue. And I think we see that a lot in our queue as well.
Hey, Mom,
Robin,
do you know where they have the laundry basket?
And so people who so anyway, just Mayor's comment reminded me of Becky's message this morning. So I was going to mention Leanne. So Leanne has said what she and Anne and I have all talked about how we really do enjoy Flash, and we really like seeing Flash pieces in our work in the magazine. Leanne says that she likes writing voices that are singular and a narrative that is unexpected. She likes to be surprised, and not in a way that is based on shock value, but she enjoys humor, surrealism, and some deeply felt distillations. And I think if you took a look through some of the excerpts that we post, you can kind of get a feel for the type of writing that Leanne likes to accept and likes to run. And and y'all may have sensed also, as we describe what we're looking for, all of the editors we all strive for a sense of balance between voices and representation. Mare and Jessica do a really impressive job of seeking out different examples of all different various forms of poetry. And I think you'll see that also in the fiction and nonfiction. You get kind of samples of all these different styles and writers and voices. I just want to mention one last thing before you can start asking us questions instead of listening to me ramble. But we also offer feedback and critique for our pieces, and we actually just recently we're offering that separately. So for poetry and for nonfiction, we offer like a short, like a paragraph, or Anna Mare, if you want to delve into how the feedback works, but there's short, kind of very concise comments about the piece that you send to us. And on fiction, we offer a longer, more in-depth critique, which will go usually like a 2 or 3, usually 2-page analysis of your story. And so we've got a lot of positive comments about the feedback and the critiques that we also do. So John, I think maybe happy to open it up to questions if
Okay, let me give you just a quick tour for everybody of Zoom. The easiest way to raise your hand and be seen is in the reactions buttons down below. And make sure you're not doing the applause. Make sure you're doing the raise hand. The two signs look very similar. And if you are at a place where you really don't feel comfortable or you can't voice your question, you can put in the chat and I'll read it for you. But this is your chance to ask them about literary magazines in a way we haven't with other publishers, because they're a kind of a different animal. And I have a question myself, but I think we'll have Cynthia go first.
Okay, I was wondering, the critiques sound wonderful. Do you charge for those, or is that just something you do for anyone who sends you something?
That's good point. We do formally charge for the feedback and the critiques. So yes, and it's we can jump over the charges. But yes, yeah, we do charge. And Anne and Mare, we've talked about this a lot, about, whenever, I think we'd love to respond and provide some comments on just about every submission we see. And I think we'll do that spontaneously sometimes. But the feedback and the critique steps are kind of formal responses. And so we do see it as a professional service that we charge for and have kind of our internal standards we want to meet for our responses.
And do you have, can you put that in the chat, how much you charge?
Sure. That's a good idea. I will do that. Yes.
Okay, and this is just for people who submit to your magazine, or can somebody else do it if they don't submit? Like if they're not ready to submit?
The poetry for feedback is not connected to the queue. So if you send in poetry for me to look at and comment on, it's not part of the publication queue.
Okay.
And critiques in the fiction critiques and the nonfiction critique feedback are the same. It's separate from the submission.
Okay, great.
And that's something relatively new. They used to be tied together. We considered it a submission and a request for feedback.
Yeah, but then we found out that some people thought we were playing the game that way, and it was an unfortunate overlap, so we stopped.
Anyway, it sounds like a good offering to me, so thanks.
Great, yes, and I will tap away here for a couple minutes to get that into the chat.
Okay.
Well, I have a question for Mare, and I'm looking in Daniel Krines's here, and Daniel writes a lot of long poetry, like sometimes 5-6 pages. And you had mentioned that you, I don't know if you're looking for long poetry or you just also will publish it, or what are you looking for there in terms of long poetry?
So you're asking if I'm looking for long poetry or what I look for in a long poem? What's your question?
Both, actually. That's
okay. I'm never not looking for a long poem, but I don't go into a submission going, gosh, I hope this has a long poem in it. It's all about the quality of the work itself. If somebody only writes long poems, I hope and pray they don't send me 6 10-page poems, because then I have 60 pages to read from one poet. But that has happened as well. So there is no limit. I'm trying to get across that there's no limit to what you can do in the poetry queue. And that goes for formatting as well. If you only write long poems, then send me your long poems, because that's where your heart is at, And if you try and adapt that and think I want to look at some short ones too, and then you butcher something to give me one stanza, it's not going to fly anyway. So give me what you write, What I look for in a long poem is the energy to sustain the length. It has to be genuine unto itself, right? Don't just, as a writer, the temptation can be to ramble or to create a first draft that's twice as long as it needs to be. So long poems need to genuinely give me something on each page of why this is still going on, right? And then from beginning to end, there has to be a shift in my awareness. The long poem ideally doesn't give me 6 pages to just, or 7 or 10, to be in exactly the same spot I was when I started, unless it's written to be around. So that's what I'm saying. There's all kinds of variation here. And I have no idea if that answered you or left you more confused, but you can write, anyone can write a prose poem and call it prose because it's in the shape of a paragraph. But if each line of that paragraph doesn't have energy, doesn't have a reason to be there, then it's not a prose poem. And the same thing is true for an 8-page exploration of modern culture. Right? Everything in that long poem has to have a reason for being there. Does that help?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I think, Danielle, it looks like you have a question.
Oh,
I don't
I,
see-
me? I never thought my poems were long.
well, that's it, right? That's the other thing. Yeah. I mean, if you're writing in your own voice and you're writing what feels like you should be writing, then these categories are arbitrary.
Mm.
If it's not book length, it's not epic. Well, who says? Maybe it is, but maybe my book is only 8 pages long. These things change. These things change.
That's great. Okay. Who else has a question? Well, okay. So I'm wondering, you run a really great program that is in some ways similar to Culturama, some ways very different, called the Red House Writers. I wonder if you could talk about that and how people can get involved with that.
Oh, Jim, you want to tackle that?
Oh, sure. And to say, I put the price ranges for their critiques in the chat, and it says formally there that it's only for fiction, but one of our associate editors also is a very he's interested in seeing nonfiction pieces also for critique. So we're happy to see that. And feedback, and I have to, I'm sorry, I wanted to confirm what we're currently charging for feedback, but Submittable has changed a lot of its interface, and I can't find our gross prices. And I think, is it $4 for feedback or $3? Do you recall offhand?
I can't recall offhand. And can I respond quickly to Edna's question about whether we're open to submissions from other countries? Yes, we are.
Yes.
We are an international magazine, and every issue we are publishing somebody from somewhere else. So yeah, some great stuff comes from all around the world. I just read a poet yesterday who had submitted some stuff from, where was it? Nairobi, actually. So, okay.
So, and so John mentioned our Red House Writers, and this is something that kind of the same 4 of us started in. We really value those chances we have to get away and kind of step back from everything that's going on, and kind of to talk about writing and to have a chance to write, interact with other writers. And so what we've organized are some small kind of instructional weekends. We'll have 2 speakers and up to 20 of us gathering together, and we'll have some in-depth instruction sessions and some writing sessions, and then some time to interact. We've been doing this since 2016.
Mm-hmm. Because
we do,
Jim, backstory, why since 2016?
So we were all in the same writing program, an MFA program here in in Washington State, and it went under. It didn't. I mean, it had a great 10 years. It was a wonderful program, but financially it wasn't tenable. And part of the writing residency that we all treasured was this 10-day instructional period where we were together. And as the program closed, we all kind of said, what can we do to try to sustain this and to keep this going? And this is what we came up with. And we call it Red House Writers because one of the houses that became kind of a place for people to stay during this residency was this very red house. It became kind of a gathering place for people in the program. So it's that, I guess, that spirit that we try to kind of continue education, continuing the writing community, sustaining all of that is what we've been trying to do with Red House Writers. We are lucky to have John join us at one of our recent ones. Of course, with COVID, intimate weekends with 20 people all together in a room became, not feasible. And so we had a couple of virtual sessions, but we're easing back into in-person sessions now. And, it's largely been kind of word of mouth. And so if, John, I'm just thinking out loud, we don't have a formal, just thinking out loud, if people were interested, how we might hear about it. I guess we could
collect emails.
Or let me put,
if you send it to me, I can put it on the Culturama community page. And if you're interested in this kind of thing, just sign up to be a member of the Culturama community page. And you get information.
Okay. Yeah, John, so should I get email information to you to post that? Would that work? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. I'll do. Great. Thank you for raising that. And again, part of what we look for in the magazine, the organization, is this community, and for kind of helping support each other. And the critiques and the feedback and the Red House are all kind of a part of that we aim to do. And I'm rambling again, so I hope there are some other questions.
Okay, so does anybody have any questions? I've got a ton locked and loaded, but if like the question about New Zealand, I wouldn't have thought of. Oh, Cynthia.
Hi, I'm curious about Red House Writers, what you do there. Do you get together in a group and critique each other's work?
No, so we don't have like workshops. What we'll usually have is so it goes kind of from Friday evening to Monday morning, and so kind of Saturday and Sunday are the formal work days. And how we'll usually structure is have a formal presentation about a particular theme or aspect in the morning, and then kind of writing exercises and prompts in the afternoon. And then we'll have kind of a general social gathering and readings in the evenings. But we haven't done like critiques or workshops.
No, it's not that kind of residency. We don't show up having read other people's packets and ready to talk about them or anything like that.
People have got banded together after the after the weekends and kind of formed informal groups. And there has been a nonfiction group and a fiction group and a blend of the two. And I'm not sure, did poetry ever? I don't know.
Not that I know of. That would have been nice. No, we have the two instructors. We work with them for a couple of months in advance before we actually hold the weekend. And we try to find a topic that they would like to present on and we think people want to hear about. And they have a presentation in the mornings, and they each have one day. So one instructor does Saturday, one does Sunday. And another big aspect of what we're trying to do on that weekend is create a community. So everyone is asked to be there for everything as much as possible. And then everyone reads whatever they feel comfortable reading in the evening. And we try to be a supportive audience for each other. They've been very fulfilling. It's really important, I think, for writers to be within their own community. Oh, and the other aspect of that is that we try to have held these in nonprofit facilities, giving back to the arts community and being in the nature in some form. In Southern California, where are we, Anne, when we hold that up by Yucaipa?
Yucaipa, yeah. So it's called Luther Glen. It's a farm. It's under the aegis of it's Luther Glen. It's a Lutheran organization, but it's completely
non-secular.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a lovely place.
Very supportive of all. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Nano has a question.
Actually, I just wanted to speak to the Red House Writers workshops because I've attended a couple of them and they're just really wonderfully nurturing. I went to Silver Springs, I think is the name of it. Silver Falls in Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was also a part of the Whitby Writers Workshops in NYLA. And it's just wonderful to get together with other writers like that. It's really generative and I highly recommend. So just wanted to chime in with that.
Oh, thank you.
Great.
Thanks, Nancy.
So we've got a whole bunch of people who may have submitted, may not have submitted in the past. What would you advise people not to do when they're submitting? You say, "Oh, geez, I can't believe that person. I feel so bad for them." That kind of thing.
Well, for one, don't tell me everything in your cover letter that you're trying to get the poems to do. I think we say that on the website, but just to be clear, don't try and explain your work. The impulse for any writer is to go, but you don't have to, I want to tell you what I'm doing. It's like, well, you're telling me what you're doing in what you're submitting. And I think you have to trust the work to do that. So that's one thing that makes me wince. It's not an automatic decline, but it does make me wince. And you don't want to start out with the editor wincing at you. And obviously what everybody says no to, right? Don't give me hate speech. Don't give me, some heinous topic that no one wants to hear about. And by that, I mean, violence that has no point except to be like the poem's version of a snuff film, right? Don't give me something that, oh God. All right, so one guy obviously had some kind of mental illness because he submitted poetry to me. He did this 2 different reading periods. There was 6 poems each, and every single poem was basically his love sonnet to his penis. And it was like, I am done with that. And, it's like, yeah. So these are things that, don't do that. But be nice to your editor. Editors are human. Really, we are. And do you have a...
there's this rule that I'm about to express. It gets broken all the time, but I would say don't send me writing about writing. And it's not because I don't read that or I don't like it. It's that Toyota service calling me. It's that we're not the right tool for the job on that. There are some great publications that Brevity, for example, where you can write about craft but I'm even talking about writing an essay about being in a place like Red House Writers. We're not the right tool for the job for that. I'm happy to read it, but I'm probably not going to publish it just because from the most inexperienced writer that we might publish to the most experienced writer that we might publish. We're all writers. So it's not unusual. It's not a unique aspect of our experience. So I would just say, if that piece is generated through a writing class or teaching or student studying, write about everything else in that experience rather than the workshop or the class.
Mm.
I get a lot, and it's funny, I get a lot of that. I get a lot of writing about writing, and I don't, like I said, I like it. It's just, I'm not gonna, it's not something that TLR is best, doesn't serve the piece, I don't think, very well, because it's not what we focus on. So.
Well, that's an interesting point you're making, that if you were to accept something that was wrong for TLR, you'd be hurting the writer, which is another reason that people get rejected. And then they think, well, I thought this was a good piece. But no, it's a very good piece. Therefore, you shouldn't be at this place.
Mm.
Yeah, and a lot of times I will, if it's writing about writing, a lot of times I will list places that I think that they could send it, where that publication is asking for that kind of thing, or that piece would be well served. That writer would be well served. Win-win for both the publication and the writer in a certain other venue.
All right. It looks like Daniel has a question.
Yeah. Yeah. Hi. Thanks. Thanks, John. I think that's a really hard question for you guys to answer. What do you not want, rather than what do you want? What you may have already answered this. I think I heard a little bit. I came in slightly late, but I know you said you like flash fiction with a twist at the end and things like that. But what kind of writing do you want, rather than what you don't want? Because there's writing comes in so many forms, so many. And a lot of mine is kind of hard, for example, to, it's kind of conjecture, kind of trying to find out what it is that's going on a planet where nobody knows what's going on, kind of thing. So it's hard to understand. So I don't want to submit it to a bunch of places where they're looking for sitcoms and things like that, you know.
Well, Daniel, are you talking about poetry specifically, or are you
poetry? But lately I've been writing a lot of, I call them my morning rants, you know, and sometimes they surprise me. You know, I enjoy reading them, and which is probably the most important thing for a writer, to enjoy their own writing, which unfortunately keeps me from sending in submissions a lot. But I don't know if I would call it prose poetry, but it's, you know, just a few pages, and it's just kind of explorations and in a reality that just seems kind of untenable and difficult to pinpoint what is going on this planet that is so strange, on a place that we could be in paradise tomorrow, but we're not. What's going on? That's weird, don't you think? I mean, that's the kind of stuff that I like to look at, and I don't know if this is the proper venue for that. So I was just curious what kind of pieces you're looking for. Entertainment value, or entertainment, of course, you don't want to bore people to death, and you don't want a dissertation or anything, but are you looking for things that are a little kind of groping in the dark sort of things, I guess is the way I would describe it, possibly.
We're always, and one thing, I definitely keyed on and sorry, Anne, didn't mean to jump in. Just interesting that you're saying, is it prose poetry, or is it nonfiction, or is it an essay? And that's a space that just, I think all of us find really fascinating. Anne has run some short nonfiction pieces that are incredibly lyrical and could be, you know, definitely if the writer chose to, could call it prose poetry. And I think Mayer has done the same with some of the prose poetry he's accepted is, could be so close to a lyrical essay. And that's such a great,
Yeah.
I think Leanne called
absolute overlap there.
Yeah.
And I write these days, not exclusively, but predominantly prose poetry. But that doesn't mean that's what I want to see. That's a space that I'm very comfortable with right now. And I can't remember who said it, but I remember reading someplace that the definition of a prose poem is if the poet calls it that, and it depends on how and where it's submitted. And Anne and I, we haven't done it recently, but we have swapped things back and forth. Like, I think this should be in your genre, not mine.
Mhm.
And oftentimes if it's that tight and it's been in poetry, and I mean, it's not every time, but a lot of times it's a finalist. If not, I accept it because I love tight lyrical pieces. Now Daniel, that doesn't answer your question, because you're talking more about personal essays. You're working through something in your head on paper. And so I would just say that certainly I would read it. Certainly it's a contender if it does sort of, if it's an intentional piece, it comes to, I'm not saying tie it up in a bow, but work it all the way through and craft it with intention. So doesn't have to be necessarily lyrical, but make sure, like Mare was saying about poetry, make sure that any sentence in there has a reason for being in there, and that it's the best sentence, that written the best way that it can be written. So
yeah, and to reiterate what I said before, it's not what I'm looking for or what I'm not looking for. What I'm looking for in those words is you, the writer. It has to be yours. And there's no better way to describe that. And that's where writers start to take, rejections and acceptances and stuff kind of on the chin, because they've put themselves on the page and then they're not getting accepted. And it's, but the only way to be honorable to your urge to write, I think, is to put yourself on that page. That's what you have to do. It's not an easy process, and it's not for the timid.
I think, and I think, Anne, you touched on this too, that, and Mare, I think when you've talked about some things you look for, I think there's also very important to, it's going to be very personal and very, very individual, but there also, I think we're really looking for a step that also generalizes it and universalizes it. And, that can be a tough thing to do. And Anne, you reminded me of one of the essays you took where a guy was stuck in an airport with an unexpected layover, which we've all had and is all aggravating and tiring and stressful. But he took all those events and he brought them into a reflection of, cross-cultural experiences and race in America and and so he took these personal emotional responses, but he was also able to broaden that into something to kind of general universal lessons. And I think that's that kind of, I guess you call it dichotomy, or that kind of contrast, is something we really, really like to see. I think I'd say both in nonfiction and poetry, if that helps.
Yeah, we have some questions in the chat, so I'm just going to voice something. Nina asked, do you accept visual poems, as in erasure poems and collage poems?
Jim?
Okay, and I'm
turning to Jim, by the way, because he's the guy who's in charge of our format for publication.
And I'm thinking strictly mechanics, right? I mean,
it is mechanics.
If we, yeah, I mean, I think we would love to see it. I think the challenge would be logistical. If we had something we really wanted to run, typically we just, typically with our printer, our internal pages are text and print. So if we had to do, I'm just thinking if we had to do an image, that would be the challenge. But I think, Mayor, I would imagine if you or Jessica saw something that you really, really thought we should include.
I've had
find
a
a way to
couple that
run it.
have been close as erasure poems, and then by close, what I mean is that I read the poems that strike me several times before we make final decisions. And close means that I've read the work multiple times before I've made final decisions and had to decline it. Images are a little harder. I personally haven't got a response to images. I know that exists, and that's why we have 2 poetry editors. And I try to be honest with myself about that. I respond to words on a page. That's why I'm a reader, and that's why I read poetry as words. And the words themselves can be anywhere on the page, or it can be erasure. But when it's actually reliant on a photograph or an artwork, it's harder for me to get the full import of what I feel like the creative person is trying to do. If that makes any sense. I'm trying to be honest as I can here, but we do have 2 poetry editors. So it doesn't exclude what you're doing. It means that I would hand it off to Jessica and say, Jessica, look at this.
Okay, thank you. We have a question from Lavina. She asks, in poetry, would you like to see a group of related poems, or does it matter if the subject and approach varies somewhat or even quite a bit?
Quite a bit's perfect. It's actually related poems that can run into trouble because we try not to publish more than 1 poem per poet because we only have so many limited spots. We have a huge queue. We have many people who submit. And in my opinion, it's not fair to take up more than 1 spot by 1 poet, right? We're trying to get a diversity. We're trying to put as many voices out there as we can. So even if you gave me 6 interlinked poems that really rely on each other and draw strength from each other, only 1 of them is going to be published. And that makes my choice harder. So if you got 6 different ones, go ahead and send me 6 different ones. You got 6 different styles, that's fine. You want to send me a haiku with a long poem in the same batch, go for it. I can look at anything is the point.
Right. And Cynthia asks, how long after the end of the submission period do you get back to submitters?
Oof. That can be a while, but we try and limit it. What's our goal, Jim? We have a stated goal.
Yes, 2 months.
2 months.
2 months from the submission date.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Which can feel like a lot when you're
And
on
we
the other
do-
end waiting.
And for impatient folks or for people who are eager for, we do have an expedited category. I think it's for extra $2. We'll move that up to a response within 2 weeks.
$3, yeah.
$2? $10. Want my $2?
No, I'm saying 2 weeks. Yeah, sorry.
2 weeks, sorry. 2
Yeah.
weeks, yeah. And
2 weeks for
again, as we
$3.
say response, it won't necessarily be a yes or no, absolutely, but it will be either, it will be yes, no,
Yep.
or I'm still looking at it.
It
You'll
will be
hear from an
it will be,
editor.
I have read it and I'm either with nonfiction, it's yes or no. Or a lot of times I need more time with this. You have opted for expedited response. Are you okay with me continuing to consider this because it really is in the running? So
Yeah, I've had some of those and accepted some of those. It doesn't bump your chance at acceptance. What it does do is mean you'll probably get an answer that is either yes or no, or maybe. And you've heard from me. This is your maybe answer. I want to keep looking at this. Yeah.
Great. Hiba asks, how do you feel about rhyme? Does it automatically disqualify poems? Do you like it, or are you just neutral about it?
It doesn't disqualify anything. We have published many different rhyming poems. We even had a long rhyming poem earlier on that was more or less riffing off of Hamilton, the Hamilton beat, and about the experience of listening to Hamilton. It was very meta, but it doesn't exclude a thing. If you're going for a form, like an actual traditional form, of which there are many, right? You could sonnet or whatever, I'm even, because my head is hurting, I'm blanking on these names, Villanelle. They're trickier, they're dicier, they take a lot of thought and craft to pull them off well, and you have to rhyme in a specific spot. So it's easier to mess those up in a way. But if you're creating your own rhyme scheme, again, go for it. Wow me, be yourself.
Great. I have a question about your editorial process. Is it yes or no, or do you sometimes work with writers to change what they've done to some degree? What does that look like?
I'm going to go right. The piece that Jim referred to, where the guy was in the airport, that piece, I accepted it, but it needed to be. So he graciously allowed me to work, to put it off to another issue, and we worked on that for a couple months, and I'm really proud of what he came up with. I think it was a much better piece, and I will work with the nonfiction people, and I would say it's me just asking more questions. It's not me saying you need to do this, you need to do this. It's what do you think about this spot? Is this again with the intention? Is this what you intended, or do you want to punch that up, or do you want to? Is that something you really need? That kind of thing. It's really just kind of pinching and pulling the clay to make the sculpture exactly what the writer wants.
I tend to take an extremely light touch with any poetry that editorially, because if it's good enough to make it that far that I want to accept it, it's not going to have that many problems, if any. And the problems I'd be looking at would be single word choices. This one word in your final line could be a better word choice. What do you think it should be? Like, I don't do it for them. It's their poem. And it's only at the very end when we're both totally happy with what we're looking at, because I'm not going to publish over the poet's head either. It's not going to be like, I accept this and you're going to just lump it because now I'm going to print it this way. That's not how it flies. So, but the touches are light, very light, because you've given a lot of work to it, a lot of thought. It's you on the page, and I'm responding to that. So there's not anything else I need to do.
And taking the risk to speak for Leanne, but from what I've seen of Leanne's process, it's similar to Anne's, where if she sees something that she wants to work or something that's interesting, she will dig in pretty carefully with some of the writers to craft a piece. And John, it'll usually be, yes, we're interested in your piece. Are you willing to make some changes to work with us on some edits? So I say there's probably, there's just like, no, this is not right for us. No, this was close and it's a good piece, and maybe, if you submit again, think about this. That can be a response. And then there can be the acceptance, like, yes, but are you willing to work with me on some of these aspects of it, or work through some edits? and like Leanne does, we'll do a fair amount of work with some of the writers.
But they've got much longer pieces to work with.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm dealing more or less with a page or a page and a half.
Yeah. And poetry it is a very different process. And
Oh yeah, I mean, what's off limits in poetry? You tell me.
yeah.
Right? It doesn't have to have correct punctuation or spacing, or, you know, you can have made up words. You can do anything you want to in poetry.
Which is a conversation we have with our copy editor almost every issue.
All the time. It comes back, it gets to the copy edit stage and it comes back and it's like, is this an intentional choice of the poet? It's like, yes, it is. Leave it alone. You know, slap the hands, go away from it. Yeah.
But it's always, you know, and I think our copy editor does pose the question that way. It's like, is this
Very
deliberate?
delicately.
Yes. Is this intentional? Just, you know,
Yeah.
noting this is not classic grammatically correct, but is this intentional by the poet? And
Yeah.
and we'll do that in prose as well, the copy editing process.
Yeah.
That's great. It looks like Tommy has a question.
Oh, this is about poetry, and one of the struggles that I have sometimes is long lines. You know, people will write their poem on a 8.5 by 11 or type in an 8.5 by 11 format, and then that's not how you print it.
Yeah.
Do you get battles with that? I mean, usually I just wrap it with a little indent, but how do you handle those?
Yeah, Jim, how do we handle those? That comes up a lot.
Yeah, it does. And we do our best. We do I like to think we do everything we can to preserve the poet's original vision.
Mm-hmm.
And especially sometimes where the form is very kind of integral to the piece. Yeah, we worked on so hard one issue that it actually corrupted, it messed up the whole rest of the issue. So that was an extra step
Poetry
for
hadn't
us.
a moment.
But
Yeah.
but yeah, Tom, if it does get to the point, and if the poet is okay with it, our typical response is if it's going across the line is to wrap it indent by a fraction of an inch. So it's kind of visually tell the intention was that this was to be on the full line. I think on the digital page, actually, very often you'll have a better chance of it showing up the way you will like because the ebook won't necessarily force the line breaks. If that makes sense.
That goes back to the digital too. You know, I don't know, it depends on how you format it on the digital, but sometimes just interesting formatting on a poem can be hard to manage on digital.
That is true.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we kind of have two. We have a PDF version, which is very static, which is just reproduces what the print copy is, and then we also do an ebook version. And you're right. And it kind of depends, you know, what's the actual underlying instruction in the format, whether it follows a line or breaks. And
ebook can blow up poetry completely.
Yeah. Well, I guess the bottom line is that we do run into formatting trouble with poetry every time. And that doesn't stop us from picking a poem. It means that the editors have now handed Jim a headache. And when it goes to copy edit, Jim and the copy editor, and then we involve the poet. And, you know, there's a lot of steps before we publish, and we try and get it the best solution we can. But yeah, every single time Jim deserves like a case of beer because he has to figure out something rather complex.
I like that you work with the writers too. That's nice.
Always. We represent the writer as much as we can in all that we do, and that's why we also pay the writer. That's paramount. Yeah.
Kimberly asked, do you nominate for awards, and how do you decide?
We do nominate for awards.
It depends on the format that we are supposed to apply, or the submission that we're required to give. But for example, with Pushcart, each genre, I got 2 nominations for 2021. Mare and Jessica got 2, and fiction got 2. So it just depends on where the number of submissions that we're allowed to put in. Jim, you probably can speak to different.
Yeah, I think so yes, and we like to, and we're kind of I think always on a search for other awards that we can participate in. Because we think that again goes back to supporting the writer, and supporting our contributors. And if we hear something, if it comes across into the main inbox, I'll look at the requirements and what the genre is, and like in the case of Pushcart, how many we get, and then we can kind of we'll go to that specific editor and say, hey, like best like microfictions, here's the word count and the word count and format that is limit us, and then we can go through and choose from usually that year's issues.
And like Best New Poets has to be like, you can't have a book yet, I think is the deal on that one. And how go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say, would you say would be open to writers if there's an award that they qualify for and that TLR can fit into? For example, we don't publish all of our publication online, so we can't nominate for an online awards.
Like Best the Net, right?
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. Exactly. But if there's some award, we would take suggestions, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. There you go. Yeah.
And then and there's a series of like the best of the year anthologies. For a lot of those, they just ask for us as a way of submitting. We send them copies. So Best American Essays, Best American Short Stories, O. Henry Award, we'll send a copy of each issue to them, and so
they actually decide. Yeah.
And they decide.
Yeah.
And quick plug for Anne that I think 2 years in a row now we've had notable essays.
3 years in a row.
3 years in a row.
Yeah.
So
at least two. I think last year we had 3, which is huge for a that's averages to 1 per issue. Yeah.
Yeah. So notable essays in Best American Essay. So we're pretty excited about that. So I hope that, So short answer is yes.
Okay, so I've got another question. So I think of TLR as being one of the larger magazines, and it's got wide distribution, that sort of thing. And we've been talking to a lot of small magazine publishers. Do you see yourself? Is there a difference between that and how you approach stuff and how you accept work, how you work with writers, etc.?
Well, my first question is what are your definitions for large and small?
I'm thinking large in the sense that you have a lot of, if a lot of people around have heard of you and they think, they put you in the same kind of category as Boulevard and that sort of thing. And you're not specific to a region. Whereas a small magazine might be magazines that I've been a part of would say, okay, so we're really trying to serve Southern California, even just the Inland Empire of Southern California. So yeah, I think of that as a small magazine.
Does that change what we do? I don't know. It might change our submission queue, how people view us, but I don't know if it changes what we do exactly.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think we've sorry, I'm
that's a puzzling question.
I had a part of an answer that
well, think about Jim, think about your experience with Soundings, for example, versus your experience with Tahoma. Soundings is a much smaller.
Yes, and Mayor was on that. Soundings was a literary magazine that the writing program we're all a part of would put out. And John, to your point, that was, could say that was pretty regional, and kind of Pacific Northwest. And yeah, I think definitely the scope of who we interact with can definitely change and grows. And Yeah, and I guess in the kind of the regional and the scope of it, I guess.
Well, maybe we promote more national things on our Twitter and stuff, because the people that are contributing to our magazine are coming from those areas. So that might be part of how we're different. But I don't think it changes what we do exactly. I really got to think about that question more, John. I'm sorry.
Well, that to me sounds really kind of wonderful, because I think a lot of people are intimidated by the kind of magazine that you're running, and they're thinking, well, this is the show. I don't know that I can submit to a place like TLR. Let me submit instead to Soundings, and I think that's maybe not the right way to approach those two different places.
And one thing that was on my notes to mention at the start, which I did not, is that we don't reach out and solicit contributions, and we don't have like contributing editors. So everything that is in our magazine has come in through the submissions. So
open queue. Yeah.
Open queue. We don't set aside a space for a regular contributor or anything. So I think that kind of feeds into what you were saying, John, that everybody who submits, we've had folks with multiple books and award nominations, awards right next to someone who's showing up being published for the first time, and they'll be right next to each other in the magazine.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the most talented writers I've read have had not yet have book and very limited education. It doesn't matter, because it's all about putting the words on the page. And as Jim said, maybe that is the one thing we don't do differently, John, is that we don't solicit these big names to come and, I don't know, add to our masthead or promote or whatever, because it's not about the big names, it's about the writer. Everything we do is about the writer.
We are getting kind of close-ish to the end, so I want to give people a chance to ask questions before I follow up with any of my own questions. Does anybody have something burning inside that I can finally talk to an editor?
And
just a quick one. I mean, and again, you may have answered this already. What is the circulation of your press? What group of people does it generally reach out to? Like, I have a friend who is an avid reader. She reads cover to cover every month, the Sun magazine, for example. But very few people read anymore. So I'm just wondering who actually gets your magazine. Who reads it?
No, that's a great question. I think we talk about that periodically. So our circulation, so we have, I'd say, for subscribers, just off the top of my head, I'd say we have about 300 regular subscribers. And then at events such as writers' conferences, or if we have reading events, we will sell hard copies in person. Also available on Amazon for sale. And for everyone who submits, if you submit to us, then we also provide a digital copy of the magazine. So we can say, like, if we have 1,000 submitters each reading period, that's 1,000 copies of our latest issue that go out. That said, I think it's a lot of us, writers and avid readers, as well as writers, I think, that come to our magazine. And it's something we talk about a lot, about ways to expand that out and let it have your friend who reads the Sun to pick up a copy of TLR once in a while too.
But also, though, every submission group, I am consistently astounded by people all over the world who have read our books. I mean, several from Chechnya came through that one time. Do you remember? And several countries in Africa. We've accepted a poet from New Zealand, from Ireland, from France. I mean, the addition of it being online is just amazing, and people can order it from anywhere. But direct hard numbers, I don't think we have that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So in some ways, it'd be really helpful too if like for example, my friend who is such an avid reader is to I don't know, maybe you have some backlog copies we can send to all of our friends. So to increase the subscribers for you.
Hmm.
Because I think it's so important today, because people have become pretty shallow in a lot of ways, you know, just it's because things are moving so fast in the world that we forget to love each other and care and take time to be with each other and to give attention to each other. And so everything has moved so fast that it has become a little bit shoddy in a lot of ways. So it's really nice when there's something really quality, which it sounds like your publication is, to share that with people. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the covers. Yeah, I just went to the site a little while ago. They're beautiful. Yeah.
Mm.
Oh, thank you.
And this, just this one in particular, this is a local, he's, oh gosh, he's not in Walnut, but he's near, he's in Mount Sac
Oh,
neighborhood.
Looks like John Brantingham because there's a bear on there.
what's the name of the artist?
Okay, I'm gonna have to remember this. Oh gosh. Raul Pizarro.
I don't know him. That's I'm gonna have to meet him.
Yeah, he's shown at what's the what's the DAF DAT oh yeah, he's been through there, and yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's one of our big central art hubs here.
Yeah. So.
Okay, great. One of my questions was going to be distribution, like how do you do that? But you know, I think kind of just for the sake of kind of transparency, so people like know what it's like to be you. I wonder if you could walk us through like the day in the life of an editor and what they do, and like so somebody sitting there saying, "Why does it take 2 months? What is you know what is the day of the life of an editor?"
Oh, wow. A day in the life of the editor. Well, start out with a Zoom meeting often. When we look at the queue, when I look at the queue, I filter it in submittable in the program itself where we receive these submissions by date. So I'm looking at the oldest first. And because we have 2 poetry editors, the first thing I do when I open a submission is I mark it Mayor first read, which means that Jessica can skip over it and start looking at other things. And that reading can take hours because depending on the submission, there's many pages, and I'm not going to skip over stuff you've sent me. I'm not going to read like one line into the poem and go, oh, this sucks, move on. You know, I want to be careful. I want to be very careful. And I don't make any decisions on the first read. And so a big chunk of the early days when we're open is just doing that. And then, you know, at some point, there's a tipping point on a time factor. I'll start going back to the very early ones and reread them and see if they've improved or declined, or, you know, where that needs to be. And that's what I mean when I tell contributors that you've risen through the queue, that there's been multiple going back to the beginning, and either your work is rising or it's falling. And that's my day. And we don't make final decisions until, well, right now, right? We're making final decisions now for a reading period that opened. When did we open? October 1st?
Yeah.
No, is that right? No,
Yes.
September 1st.
September
I don't
1st.
know. Whenever we opened.
September 1st, yeah.
September 1st. So we had
October.
September and October, and we're making final decisions now. Yeah. So I don't know I don't know how Anne works, but that's how I do it.
Similarly, I yeah, there's a lot of organization that takes place even before you even read a piece, just because you want to make sure that when you want to make sure that when you come back to it, you have put notes in, or you have categorized it so that you can compare it. What if I get 3 essays or 2 essays on hospice care, a family member who is in hospice care, and I kind of want to, I hate to say I can't take more than one, because I'm sure all 3 of them are great, but I need to make the notes and be able to justify with myself and with the writer. I want to talk to the writer. I want to write to the writer and tell them, honestly, this was a great piece. And here's what here's what was great about it. It comes up, it came up, it just didn't match with what else was in my, that's either in the queue or that I've already accepted. There's a very great balancing act, and it falls into the place the closer we get to our deadline, which is what are our decisions? Jim, here's what nonfiction wants, here's what poetry wants, here's what fiction wants. And then you kind of have to look and see what your
that's the balancing of the magazine
says. It's not just what each individual piece is like, but what is your mix saying? So that doesn't really tell you what I'm doing on a daily basis, but those are all things in my mind as I'm sitting down and digging into the queue.
I would agree. I mean, there's a personal notes that are taken. Like if I'm getting submissions of 6 poems each time. Eventually, at some part in the process, I will note to myself which poem in the batch I'm most interested in or find strongest. And then I only reread that one, right? So it's risen, even within itself, it's risen. And then there are labels that I use within Submittable that the reader doesn't see. And those labels are things like long poem or couplet or triplet or things like that. And that helps balance the magazine at the end. Because although we could, there's nothing stopping us from printing every poetic choice as being a long poem. We choose not to do that because we're trying to represent as many writers as possible.
And what you're seeing we're hearing from both of our responses is this is a very, very subjective process.
It is.
She's saying, or like I'm saying, if there's 3 pieces that are similar, 2 of those pieces I'm not choosing, but they're probably just as strong a piece of writing as the one that I am. But subjectively, this is the one I'm taking. Same thing with those 6 poems that, the 5 other poems that Mare is not taking. They could be absolute gems, but they're not something she's choosing right now because of either something that's happening right now or a mix that she has already seen within what she has selected or what I've selected, or just sort of what.
And trust me,
happening.
I will absolutely tell you that in a decline note. If your poem has gotten that far and I've had to turn it down, I will absolutely let you know that it has got nothing to do with the quality of the poem. Yeah. Because again, you matter to me. You've sent me your work and I'm going to pay attention to it.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any final questions that you'd like to ask? Give you a second to type it up or to raise your hand. Okay, it doesn't look like it. Okay, so I wonder if we could get like maybe a bit of final advice you have for writers. Just each one of you, what's your best advice to writers?
Oh, wow.
It's a little loaded.
Okay.
Keep doing it. Yeah.
I was thinking of Heinlein's thing was, if you have to write, do it in private, and when you're done, wash your hands.
Yeah, I don't know. That's such a hard one. I feel like I should have had something philosophical done beforehand. But I think you have to do, yeah, this sounds so trite, but you have to do what's inside you. And whether that makes you a poet that gets no money whatsoever, or a lawyer and you make a whole hell of a lot of money, what's most important for you psychologically, emotionally, for internal balance, you do you, really. And I mean that in a good way. And that includes however you're writing.
Yeah, and I would say plan on having multiple drafts. Make sure with that first draft, with that rough draft, let it go. Let it all, don't censor yourself. Let it out. Make sure that I always talk about the clay and the sculpture. Dump all of the clay on the table. Put it all out there. Because what you need to do with second and third drafts with the actual sculpture is pinch and pull away. That's when you're taking away and you're moving things. And that's the same with writing. You have to get it all out there, and it will benefit you to have all the material that you can get out there to be able to use and maneuver. And also those first drafts tend to be, I mean, some of them, if you let yourself go, if you just go nuts,
you'll surprise yourself.
Exactly. There's going to be so many surprising elements that when you're limiting yourself, oh no, I can't say that. Or it's,
I studied with David Wagner for a number of years. I don't know if you know who that is. But his phraseology for it was the madman and the critic. And that you start out by writing like a madman. You put your soul and your emotions and your guts on the page. And only after you let it sit for a day at least, or a week or a month or whatever it takes, then you come back to it with your inner critic and you say, okay, is this any good? What needs to happen here? But don't try to do both at the same time. You do both at the same time and you'll paralyze yourself. You'll be going in two different directions.
Yeah. Getting make sure the madman doesn't listen to the critic. That's
hard.
Yeah, that's a tricky bit.
Really hard.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of going back to, we touched on a couple of times how, decline from a particular editor or a particular magazine or a particular moment. It's so hard it's so easy to say don't take it personally, and it's so hard not to take it personally. Right, the rejections that come, the declines, but I think we are doing we're doing this as editors because we want to find those pieces, and we want to share good work with everybody, and we want to do what little bit we can to help everybody be a better writer. And it can be hard with all the numbers to do that personally every time, but we want the submissions that we see. We want to find that we want all the pieces to be good. So I don't know how that all sums up into a pithy phrase, a bit of advice, but I think just the submission, there's so many things that go into why what I've written today doesn't work for the person I've sent it to. So I have to remind myself that doesn't mean someone else, that doesn't mean nobody wants it. There's too many negatives in there, but
well, the thing you said about don't take it personally, I think is pithy, and it's helped me to remember that no one knows me personally. So how can the rejection be personal? I'm not having these people over for dinner. They don't know who I am. So, I mean, that helps. That helps me build up that armor.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your words, your wisdom, your advice. And so We are, this is just the beginning of the day. We have a craft talk next with Tim Hatch. He's going to talk about writing from memory. Then we're going to have a local publisher for Bamboo Dart Press and Pelicanesis Press, Mark Givens. I think a lot of you know Mark. He's going to be talking about. I think it's what I got from it was how to create sort of a literary movement within your own area, right? Which is I think necessary. And then we're going to end the day with T. Anders Carson giving us workshops so we can just generate the way T. Anders Carson always does. All right. So thank you so much, TLR. Thank you, everybody. And we're back in just a little while.